Hello and welcome to the Bukayo Saka podcast. This week and every week we talk about Bukayo Saka exclusively for 2 hours. So strap in, guys. As always, my name is Rory and I'm joined by my very good friend
Adam, and we can guarantee that we'll also talk about the Euros and all the events of the quarterfinals. But more importantly, Rory, how are things in Milan?
I'm very good, mate. I am very, very good. Obviously, all cheered up and buoyed a little bit by England, and we're going to get into that. But the journey continues. I think it feels like we've been doing a lot of moaning, but
Wow.
there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic, right? Plenty of reasons.
Yeah, I think let's mix in a constructive optimism slash criticism of Gareth Southgate and his general tactics. But somehow we're here. We're at the semi-final stage. I never thought we'd be talking about this with this England squad, but they are here, Rory. And we'll dissect that as well as kind of talk about the other teams because we saw a hell of a belter with Spain and Germany, which unfortunately sees the end of Pedri's kind of role at this Euros. We'll also talk about England's opponents. It's going to be the Netherlands and Wout to the rescue there. And more importantly, can Mbappe ordeal or have at least a good night's sleep? Apparently, that is the issue with him at the moment. So we'll discuss this and more, right?
I feel like it's really weird. Like, sometimes football just is really weird, and you find yourself talking about a man who you've never met sleep pattern. You're like, let's analyze how he can get 8 hours a night, right? Sometimes football really is very odd. But yeah, lots and lots to talk about. I'm super excited. This Euros tournament has been fantastic. We're going to be talking about that as well. We'll be saying no to the naysayers and putting them in their place in terms of how the quality of this tournament. But let's start with England. And let's start with, of course, going to be about Bukayo Saka and how fantastic he was. But before we actually do that, let's talk about the game itself. Let's talk about England and Gareth Southgate and the North Korean style coverage that the BBC had at half time. How bizarre did you find? I felt like I was watching a different game when they came on at halftime.
Well, I'm going to rely on your commentary here on WhatsApp because I took my little boy out into the garden because he moaned at me that we weren't able to play football. But yeah, from the comments that came about, it was all about Foden and how he was somehow making an impact in this game, which baffled me because based on that 45 minutes, I did not see a single solid contribution from Foden. But I think they also talked up, was it Kieran Trippier as well for his role?
I feel like there was a bit of a PR thing going on there in terms of like, if I have to hear Phil Foden's name one more time, it's driving me a bit mad. Like, it's been the only conversation this entire tournament. I understand that he's a very good player, but there are also 10 other good players that we can focus on, right? It doesn't all have to be about him. Yeah. What I found really bizarre was the clips that they chose to show. There was one that was a really clever ball over the top to Saka, and he managed to keep it in, and it was like a really clever ball that was a good pass. But the other passes they showed before that were just bog standard, like he takes it, he receives it, he's in space, and he plays it backwards or sideways. And I was like, I understand that it was a better performance from England. It was a better performance from Foden. But you don't have to force it like, okay, now he's world class. Like, this is when all the Scotland and the Wales and the Irish fans that take the piss out of English coverage and fans. This is when they're redeemed because they're like, what is this Pravda level propaganda that we're getting thrown at us here? I just found it really bizarre. And this desperate need to like shoehorn the fact that Phil Foden's our best ever player, despite the fact that he's never really produced for England, I find a little bit odd. But let's talk about England's performance in the first half. Yep. I thought the system change did work. I thought at the beginning Saka had an interesting interpretation of left wing back when he was on the right wing, but it seems like he was playing right wing. But I think the system did make a difference. The fact that we matched Switzerland. Now, obviously, I think the first half Switzerland were definitely keeping their cards close to their chest. They weren't pushing too hard. Yeah. They definitely were saving it for the second half, right? But I feel like England, even without really producing a shot on target, there was a bit more urgency, a bit more fluency, and the system seemed to fit the players a bit better, right?
Yeah, definitely. It felt like there was a little bit more balance to the approach, should we say. The players seemed a bit more comfortable. And what was interesting to see was the mix up in terms of the style of ball. So in the sense of, whilst they did match up Switzerland for almost like for like in terms of their formation, what they did quite cleverly was, I think they learned from what Italy did in the previous round, which was they played into Switzerland's hands. You know, with the high press from Switzerland, it meant that Italy couldn't get those passes together. Whereas this time, what England did cleverly, or maybe to some people that watched it in that manner, was that they actually changed the style of ball. So it wasn't always like tick-attack of football. They also did like direct balls through Jordan Pickford at times. And that actually gave something for the Swiss to think about, because actually they were a bit more direct. It meant that the ball was getting hit further up the field, which meant those defenders and centre-backs had something to worry about as well, because the likes of Akanji and Cher, you could see that they realised that they were getting into a battle in those moments. And whilst it wasn't maybe as evident in the first half, certainly periods of that second half prior to the Switzerland goal, you saw those kind of elements come into it. I think what was interesting was we all said on our chat how England kind of started to sit back, unfortunately. So they didn't keep that momentum going. And inevitably, we saw the goal happening, didn't we, Rory? Because we kind of called it. We said Mbola was causing them a bit of a chaos at times, you know, and inevitably there was just patience. That was the good thing about Switzerland. They were just patient. Like you say, it was almost like a game of chess. They were waiting for the moves. I thought Ndoye was going to be played a little bit more into the middle. And I think at the time as well, Vargas came off a bit too early for me. I felt like actually it was still a threat. But when they did bring in Zuba into that position, obviously that did give them another outlet as well, Rory. And that was an interesting introduction as well. But overall, I felt, yes, it was balanced. It was a lot better in terms of the way that Gareth Southgate and England went about it. But there was elements where it was still tired. And we have to raise it. And I think I'm going to raise it anyway, was Kane. Every time that Saka was in a progressive kind of position where he got the ball into the box, Kane was nowhere to be seen in the box. It was like he was almost allergic to being a striker. And it was really strange that, you know, Southgate persevered for as long as he did. I don't know whether he felt that he was going to have one moment and therefore that would make or break the game itself. But unfortunately, I felt like England were better when he came off, because they actually had someone up top that was able to be a bit more fluid and being able to be that kind of target man. I mean, how did you see that?
I feel like it's difficult with Kane because he's clearly not fit, right? He's clearly not fit. He can't, like, there's no part of me, I can say many things I don't like about Harry Kane, right? But there's no part of me that thinks that he goes onto a pitch in an England shirt and doesn't put an absolute shift in, right? I think this is him not physically fit. I think we could almost be in a similar position to Portugal, that Portugal found themselves with Ronaldo, where it's a player who's undroppable because of what they've done in the past, as opposed to what's happening now. And I think you also have to remember that Harry Kane has still scored 2 goals this tournament, right? 2 massive goals, right? Obviously, the goal against Denmark and then the winner against Slovakia, right? So even though he's not been playing well, he's still got 2 goals in 5 games. So you still know he's still capable of those moments. And I think that's what's keeping him in the game or on the field for Southgate. What it then comes into is the fact that, and it comes into the Switzerland substitutions, weirdly, is that Switzerland nailed the timing of their substitutions, right? Zuba comes on, all of a sudden they're causing England all sorts of problems. Southgate, because he's a reactionary manager, has to then react. And I think because he delays his substitution so long, he's always going to wait until the 110th minute to take off Harry Kane, because you never know if that split-second chance is going to come and he's going to score. He is your best player on the pitch historically. Like, the natural cautiousness from Southgate comes out, and of course Kane stays on the field. I think what we need from Southgate, and it's a general point, is just more bravery with these decisions, right? Because especially in extra time, when the Swiss were looking tired, everyone was looking tired. Parts of it looked like that bloody Barclays Eagle advert. Like, the football was so slow because both sides were knackered. A player like Ollie Watkins then, or Anthony Gordon, who, you know, the fucking lost man of England.
Direct.
A player like that coming on then can just crack that game. I think kind of Gareth Southgate was caught between 2 stools of, do we go for penalties or do we, like, which is always why extra time is basically a waste of fucking time, because no manager's ever actually gamble for it. Everyone's like, oh, what do we do? So I think I understand why Southgate didn't make that decision, but I think it's kind of funny how it took Harry Kane being pushed off the pitch by a Swiss player for the situation to be like, okay, Kane, just stay down. Don't worry. We'll bring someone else up. But I think as these games get bigger, I don't want Harry Kane dropped, right? I don't want Harry Kane to not start the next game.
Sure.
I just want the possibility that if it's not going well, he will be replaced. That's all I'm asking. Is that in the 70th minute, in the 75th minute, if he's been miles off it like he was against Switzerland, that Gareth Southgate will turn around and go, okay, you know what, Harry, it's not your day. We're going to bring on Ivan. We're going to bring on just that possibility. And the fact that Harry Kane should really, even though he's captain, part of being captain is doing the best thing for the team. And if you know you're not on it and you're not having the best day, you should kind of be able to turn around and go, no, you know what? For the good of the team, I'm fine with coming off, whatever it is. Not like it's your choice, but, you're fine with coming off and you're happy to let someone else take your place for the good of the team. I just think it's been I can understand why Southgate is so cautious with it, because he is still England's all-time top goal scorer, right? And he has still been massive for us in tournaments. And it's just the lack of action as the game went on, especially when Switzerland scored. I was like, okay, now's the time, Gareth. You have to bring someone on. There's 15 minutes. This is it now. You've got 15 minutes. You can't just sit there and be like, oh, well, maybe you'll do something, or at least bring on someone who can give him a hand. And you say, right, okay, Kane, you just stand in the box. Watkins, you're doing his running. Or Ivan, you're doing his running. But bring someone on to give him a hand. Because I just think it was a little bit too reactionary or non-reactionary, as it often is with Southgate.
Yeah.
But the Swiss did deserve their goal. You're right. They were pushing, and we said on the group, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And they scored. It was a bit of a scrappy goal, but there was a few of those balls that had been through the box and were causing us problems. But the good thing for England is that they responded quite quickly. Now, this is the point where I'm going to talk about Bukayo Saka before we get to the penalties.
Of course.
I think he's been England's player of the year for the past 2 years, right? This whole thing was especially with the penalty, was like, oh, it's redemption for Bukayo Saka. I read a really interesting piece by Carl Anker today, who's like, it's not redemption. Bukayo Saka did nothing wrong. There was nothing for him there was nothing for him to redeem himself from. He's been across the 2 years, one of England's brightest players in an England shirt. And I think this is arguably his best performance ever in an England shirt. I think from the first minute, he had Abisher absolutely on toast. They did not know how to deal with him. They had to double up on him, triple up on him at times. But I think just his constant graft and cutting in on the inside, cutting on the outside, the tackle in the last minute of extra time or whatever it was when Switzerland were on the break, and he sprints past to block that ball across. Everything about his performance was just absolutely outstanding. I think it was I just really enjoyed seeing him have that moment where, because he's a player that across this tournament, and I know I get super protective about him because I'm obsessed with him, but when people were talking about how England improve, it was like, well, we just take Saka out. And it's like, whoa, wait. He has been our brightest spark for a very long time. I'm not taking Saka out for Cole Palmer, who's been good for one season in a Chelsea shirt. I can't see that logic. He is one of our best players. And I think this is just a great reminder for everyone that he's one of the first names on the team sheet. It's Pickford, Declan Rice, Harry Kane, Bukayo Saka. I think he's that key to this team. And not only the fact that he's one of the best right wingers in the world, but he's versatile. He'll play 4 positions in a game. It doesn't matter. How impressed were you by his performance? I just thought he was everything England created came through him.
There was a lot of pressure going into this match, and I felt like he rose to that occasion. And I think that's the thing that you can kind of allude to, is the fact that when people were doubting his credentials, I suppose, he proved in this particular match that he can be that game changer. He can be the person that can actually be the spark in amongst that kind of debate about Foden and Bellingham, who I felt had ordinary games, very ordinary games in the grand scheme of things.
Bellingham was good. Bellingham was good.
Bellingham was better at moments in this game, but I wouldn't say he was completely better than he has been, say, compared to the first group game match against Serbia, for example. But back to Saka, I felt what really did help was that reinforcement of Kyle Walker behind him, because I think that allows that kind of doubt for the opposing team to whether they're going to double up. Are they going to ensure that that right hand side has got that kind of click going forward as well? So I think that really helped Saka's game, because otherwise he was kind of isolated in previous games. He was trying to do everything that he could possibly do. But also the problem was that because there was so many players in front of him, there was no way of breaking that down, because a lot of the balls were just being played sideways, and there was no one that was kind of bold enough to kind of take on their man. And, that didn't really help that situation, because you want someone to kind of break through or like create an opportunity, or, this is the thing that I suppose kind of goes back to that Kane situation, is because he's going so deep, it's not allowing for anyone to be up top to kind of cause them a bit of a confusion. So therefore, Saka's really stuck on that wing, having to play sideward balls or play it safely, because he doesn't want to lose possession. But equally, if he tries to take on his man, then he's got no one there. Whereas with Kyle Walker, it just allowed that little element of he can take on his man a little bit more, because he got that reinforcement. But also, I think there was a little bit more positive energy about that midfield as well. They did try and do some darting runs. Mainu proved it in the previous game. I felt, again, he kind of proved it in this game. Declan Rice was a lot more forward than he previously had been as well. So I think what they did cleverly was, I felt actually Xhaka had a very quiet game for Swiss, and he was constantly giving away fouls. So despite he had elements where he was controlling the tempo as well, I felt they posed little threat in moments that England dominated the actual game in that respect. And I think maybe England need a little bit more. But I suppose the other point that I want to allude to before we finish about talking about Saka is, I do wonder whether with Southgate, through the kind of hesitation not to change things up, is he making the general team more tired? Because if you think about the last two games, they've gone extra time, and obviously in the last game it went the full length, right? But for the majority of those matches, he's kind of relied on the same personnel up until about the 190th minute for most of those players. So you think domestically they've had a really hard season, a lot of those players in that squad. Then they've had to endure this, plus the group stages. Does this kind of cause you a bit of concern in terms of you're going into semi-final? Look, it's not going to be a straightforward match again with the Netherlands, but you kind of want to make sure that, players are rested. I would imagine going into this game, actually, they would have at least spent a day where they didn't do anything, because they need to recover, right? And then what they're going to do in training, what they're going to set up for Netherlands, right? So again, it's going to be intense for that team. And I wonder if his hesitation is harming the potential of England qualifying out of the semi-finals as well.
I think, he needs to learn to trust his substitutes more, without a doubt. We've talked about this, that he should be able to make changes sooner and be able to be it's similar to Mikel. Mikel doesn't trust players that aren't in his first 11, and Southgate doesn't trust players well. So I think there is a point to that, but I think tournament football, all the teams are knackered. Right, all these players are knackered. Obviously, we've had more extra time than the Netherlands, but they've just gone. They were playing a hell of a lot quicker pace than we were against Turkey. Right, that game was hectic. I think all the teams are knackered. This isn't the time to start changing your lineup and stuff. You just stick with what you got and hope that you get to a point where you can take players off. Hey, if we're 2-3-0 up against Netherlands in the 70th minute, God willing, right? Then fucking ring the changes, if you know me. But now isn't really the time to do that. I think all the social media content that we've seen from the England camp has been the players playing golf, and I think they're very much relaxing at this point, and it's just any work they'll do on the training ground will be shape, it'll be tactics, it won't be anything super intense, because you're getting towards the end of the tournament now, and everyone must be absolutely shattered. But I think there's no part of me that's particularly worried about that. I just wish he would make substitutions a bit earlier in games and trust the players that he's picked, because I think if you pick these players and you clearly think they're good enough, right? So you just have to trust them a little bit more. I think and I think with the Netherlands, look, we're going to get on to previewing the semis. I don't think there's a famous last words. I'm not overly worried. I don't think anything is it's not like we're playing France or Spain, basically, right? I think we've got the
No.
easiest opponent of the 3 possibilities, right? But let's move on to the penalties. So it goes to penalties,
sure.
and I just want to take a minute to talk about Jordan Pickford, because I think he's a player that I love him as a character, hands down. Absolutely love him as a character. His reaction to Shaqiri nearly scoring from the corner in extra time was incredible. Him just like giving him a wink and a thumbs up, like, "Oh, you cheeky little scamp, you nearly got me there." Like, in a huge game. Like, I love the facial expressions as the guy's running up for the penalties. I'm not sure if he knows he's doing it, but I absolutely love it. His shit housing, everything about him. But we also have to say he is at this point, he is one of England's best ever goalkeepers, right? In an England shirt. He's saved at least 1 penalty in every shootout that he's faced. That's more than every other goalkeeper since the 90s, I think, combined in an England shirt. Touch wood, right? He's never had a clanger in an England shirt. He's always turned up for his country. And I think in this game in general, like you said, with his passing, he really he was so massive to it. That there was a moment where he passed and found Bellingham just along the ground into midfield, just a really clever pass. Like, I just think, and this was the moment where he shone again, right? Now, it wasn't the world's greatest penalty from Akanji, right? It was a savable penalty, but it got England off to the best possible start for that shootout. And straight away, when Akanji scored that, I was like, when Akanji missed that, I was like, I think we're going to be all right. It gave me a feeling that, we'll be all right. So it must have had the same effect on the players, right?
Definitely kind of reassures you when you've got someone that's coming off a really confident season with Everton. Look, despite the position of where they are, and I was looking at just stats as you were mentioning it. So he's had 13 clean sheets with that Everton squad, which is incredible when you think about it, because I think if you think about a team that's traditionally hooked to the bottom, you'd be lucky if they get more than, say, 5 clean sheets in that season, because that is incredible. But also when you look at goals conceded, only 51 in 38 games. Again, that's not a bad stat when you consider Everton's leaky kind of defense aspect. And then he comes into this, so he's gained another 2 clean sheets along the way as well, which is just building that confidence. But yeah, like you say, you have to be wacky, you have to have a personality to be in goal. And he's got that in abundance, and he's got that cocky, assured nature about him. But yeah, you do feel like he's a pair of safe hands. There has been moments where I would say maybe his decision making could have been better. Like, for example, in the previous game against Slovakia, should he have done better for the goal? Potentially, that would be my criticism. I feel like potentially there are moments where maybe he misreads the game. Maybe he's expecting the defender to do better in those circumstances, and hence why maybe he hesitated with that particular goal. But generally, if you look at the action and the saves that he's had to pull out at this tournament, if it wasn't for him, potentially England go down even further, potentially, or they concede further. So I think from that point of view, he has been definitely really good. I mean, you can't argue he's not the best goalkeeper for England. Definitely, without a shadow of doubt. The question mark would be, is he the international goalkeeper that is the kind of considered the next best level? And I think that's where he wants to be. He wants to aspire to be. I don't know if he's quite there yet, but there's signs certainly that he could be. And let's put it this way. If Man United came in and said, Jordan Pickford, would you join us, to displace Onana? I could see him displacing Onana. I think he's better than Onana in a lot of elements.
I think the only reason why people don't talk about him in higher praise is because he's at Everton. Honestly, I think the only reason, if he's playing for Spurs, if he's playing for United, people are talking about him as one of the best goalkeepers in the league. And I think it's only because, and sorry, Everton fans, but because he's at Everton, people are like, well, he can't be world class because he's at Everton, right? But I think he is an outstanding goalkeeper. Like he came, like you said, he came second in the Golden Glove Award this year behind David Raya, right? And that went down to the second to last game of the season. Like, he's had an incredible season, and for England, he always turns up. And I just think, even though he's a mental case, he weirdly has a calming effect on the defense because they know that, Jordan's got it. It's fine. And he makes big saves. And he comes and collects it. And He's like just really proactive as a goalkeeper, and I think it was just important that we talked about him. And yeah, that pass to Bellingham, it just go back and watch it. It's just absolute genius on the ground, incredible pass. But of course, he saves the first penalty from Akanji, and then 5 out of 5 penalties, perfect.
Brilliant.
Obviously, Cole Palmer steps up, and at no point, what I found really interesting was with every penalty taker, I was like, oh well, he takes penalties for his club. Oh, he takes penalties all the time. Oh, that guy takes penalties. And it was just, there was not one of them. Like, I remember when we lost to Portugal in one of the Euros, and then like Carragher steps up and you're like, what the fuck is Carragher doing?
Exactly.
Or like Hargreaves steps up. I'm like, why is Hargreaves taking a penalty? There was, all of them just made sense to me. And you could see it in the huddle where Gareth was just like, you're first, you're second, and all of them were like, yep, okay, cool. Yep. It was all completely decided and practiced, and everything was just methodological, if that's the word. Like it was all just set perfectly. I think the fact that they've brought in this breathing expert, right? This guy who's like into mindfulness, and you could see that Bukayo Saka waited ages to take his. I was like, man, you might get, like, you need to hurry up a little bit, like take this thing, right? But clearly they've got it all rehearsed, all practiced, and 5 perfect penalties. Obviously, the icing on the cake is, all five penalty takers were of Afro-Caribbean descent, were of immigrant descent. A real slap in the face. It's been a tough week for right wingers in Europe this week. That was another slap in the face for them. And of course, the kind of two crowning moments for me. First, Trent Alexander-Arnold getting the 5th penalty. A player who I think is massively disrespected in England anyway. He gets far too much stick. He's had a really difficult tournament. He was kind of thrown under the bus by Southgate, but he's had this moment of like, you're the guy who's putting us into the semi-finals, right? You can have this moment. It's not like it's given to him. He's taken the moment. He's delivered. I just was really happy for him in that moment. So I think he needs to have more moments in an England shirt, because unfortunately, because he plays for Liverpool, there's a lot of dickheads that just hate him because he plays for Liverpool. Unfortunately. And of course, Bukayo Saka's 3rd penalty, when with all the history and everything behind it, I have never been more nervous watching a penalty in my life than when Bukayo Saka stepped up for that one. Because all I could think was just don't fucking miss. Just if you miss, I don't want what's going to happen to you to happen again.
Yeah, I know.
It was just fear. And he said it in the post-match afterwards, I think, and he was like, people were more worried about me than I was, right? Like, my family and the fans were more worried about me missing than I was. I was just thinking about how I'm going to score the penalty, right? And it just shows you the character of the person that, like, and I think the quote he said is like, you have to be willing to put yourself in that position again after you fail. And I will always put myself in that position. And it just shows the character of the bloke. And I just think he's a very, very, very impressive man. And it was I was just so relieved and happy when it went in. Like, it was your favorite of the penalties, your favorite moments. I think we're kind of getting used to England winning penalty shootouts, which is really odd.
Well, yeah, I think this is a dangerous precedent, should I say? Because my boy saw that as his first penalty shootout, and I think he's going to expect England to deliver that on a regular basis.
You need to go back and show him the old ones. This is what it used to be like.
This is how it used to be. This is how it's evolved, right? I think you've stolen my thunder when they're talking about the best taken. I think Trent was definitely ice cold. Cole Palmer as well, just to set that tone as well. That was really important that he got that in. I think there was a bit of hesitation from my side. I was like, I know he scores for Chelsea, but this is a big occasion. But again, he kind of brushed it off. And I suppose the worry, Rory, was I've wondered whether, Switzerland get back into it in a tie from that point of penalty shootout. What's the next ones that are going to take up? This is where you start to worry, is those that aren't as willing potentially to step up. And I think, that very rarely happens, but when it does, you're kind of relying on those men to be really good at the penalties. And I don't know, there's a lot of theory that, Phil Foden was one of them that was meant to potentially be it and didn't want it. I would have expected maybe Declan Rice to step up potentially.
I thought Declan might, but I think he might have been sixth. I think he might have been the first of the others, because we've not even talked about even Tony's no luck fucking penalty.
Oh.
Like, just the absolute, like,
The
he does it
audacity.
for Brentford. He does it for Brentford all the time. Obviously, I'm not particularly invested in Brentford, but I was like, oh God, I know how he's going to take this, but he can't take this. He can't, not now. He'd like, concentrate, Ivan, please, just concentrate.
just get in.
Completely just stares at the goalkeeper the entire time. Very, very impressive. Like, by far the best penalty of them all. Just so impressive. So I think Declan would have been, because I thought, because he took one for Arsenal in the shootouts against Porto, I was like, okay, well, Declan can take him. And then you're looking at other players, you're like, I don't know. Yeah, Foden would have to be up there at some point, right? Like, but then kind of, Kane's not on the field. You're looking at your centre backs. But look, 5 out of 5. As long as we keep doing that, we can't lose, really, right? That's kind of how it works. So incredibly impressive. And through that performance, it makes me think that all of them do practice. Like, the whole squad will practice, and there will be the hierarchy. The last thing on England before we move on, because I realise we just hit the half-hour mark with England, is I want to talk about Luke Shaw as well very quickly. A bit of a redemption moment for Gareth Southgate. The fact that we've got far enough in the tournament for him to use Luke Shaw, which is good. But also the fact that he did change things massively. I think the second he came on, that whole left side of the pitch opened up for England so much more, and it just freed kind of Bellingham on that side a little bit more. He had a little bit more support.
Sure.
It's exciting that he can probably play 90 minutes against Netherlands, right?
I think, look, it was always going to be one of those that the longer that kind of England persevered in this competition, the more of a chance that Luke Shaw had at coming back into it. Then that was the gamble. That was the gamble that Southgate took, because had England not qualified, for example, I think everyone would have gone, that was your fault. That was your fault for not bringing an established left back. I still think that is naivety on Southgate's part, because you think maybe England would have had an easier ride had there been the balance of a left-sided player on that side. But look, when you look at it now, there's a potential that there's more balance, there's an outlet there's someone that's more naturally grounded out for that role, and it means less of a reliance on Kieran Trippier to fill in at the moment. So let's see what the approach is. I suspect he is going to still be another substitute personally. I think, look, he's done well to come on and play without any kind of niggles or any reactions. I think that's the other thing to worry about. But yeah, I mean, that is a positive if you're thinking about, look, it's still 0-0. You want to get that balance there, maybe create more of like an outlet on that left-hand side. And that's what he's going to give. He's going to give you an outlet. He's going to give you that width. And potentially he's much more than just his defensive duties, right? He can bomb forward as well. And he proved in that final only a few years ago that he can be a scoring threat as well. So look, the opportunity is there for Luke Shaw to make a name for himself in these stages of the Euros. So let's see what happens. But yeah, for balance, I think it'll be an interesting dilemma for Gareth to take on in the next round.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his, honestly. I really like him as a player, and I think it was nice to see him and be like, okay, no, he's fit. Like he looks like, a little bit short of max sharpness, but he's able to come on and affect a game. So I think that was really, really positive. Just final thing. The video from Edgbaston, was it, in the cricket? I'm not very good with cricket. For between the India and Pakistan fans. The fact that all sporting events in England stopped to watch the penalty shootout. Like, if you ever think your sport is close to football, you're wrong. Football is just
even Wimbledon had to cheer in the middle of one of the games as well, and the players were like, England, right? So
Djokovic kind of reacted to it, right? Anything that happens at tennis kind of winds me up. But with the cricket, the video really, in what has been a really vitriolic kind of couple of years in England in regards to everything, it was really nice to see India and Pakistan and English people celebrating this win, and it was a video that genuinely put a massive smile on my face. So if you've not seen it, we retweeted it. If you've not seen it, I'm not sure how you haven't seen it. It's gone massive, but we've retweeted it. It was just a really beautiful moment. And it reminded me of just how football brings the country together, no matter what it is. If you know what I mean, everybody stopped and watched that moment. So it's just beautiful to see. Incredible video. And we're in the bloody semi-finals, people. We keep complaining about Gareth, but that's 3 semi-finals we've got to now. It's a bit mental. And we'll preview that game later in the show. But let's talk about the other quarterfinals. We're going to go for the more entertaining games first, I suppose.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Let's go for the bigger headline. Let's go for Spain march on against the hosts. Spain 2, Germany 1 after extra time. It looked like the hosts were going to kind of at least get it to extra time. They were starting to come into the game a little bit more. We're at least going to get it to penalties. But it wasn't to be. Mikel Merino in the same stadium that his dad scored for Osasuna against Hertha Berlin or something in like the 80s, right? Yeah. Replicates the celebration of his dad, which is just fantastic. Really, football is so weird at times, and that's another mad moment. But it was a beautiful header to win that game, right?
It was an incredible moment. And I think the stat that really got me about Murillo is he turned out for Newcastle United, had 28 appearances, the forgotten man of Newcastle somehow.
Missed this. Yeah.
I don't even recall him ever playing for them. No. That shows you about the kind of how much he's grown as a player. And he's not known as a striker for scoring goals. This is the other thing. So to get the turn and that head, that was incredible. I mean, if we were saying this was done by, for example, Harry Kane or someone like Mbappe, we'd be praising them because you'd say, they're world-class finishers. But this is Morello. This was an incredible moment. And for more context, I think, if you look at the patterns of play, although Spain had the counter-attacking element through Dani Olmo for the majority of that kind of extra time period, they really did struggle. They had to grit through that kind of performance. In particular, I think it was maybe naiveness from a Spanish perspective, because you could see that they were taking off players in the second half, in particular, thinking they kind of saw this game through, and then it kind of came to bite them in the arse, and the momentum was pretty much with the home nation there. But I think there's also some naiveness that I kind of reflected on in the preview, which is Nagelsmann's decision to maybe rely on Kai Havertz. I felt like when Füllkrug was on the pitch, he was a bit more direct, causing their defenders a lot more headaches. And although he didn't get those finishing touches, it was so close on some of them. In particular, that last opportunity where Kroos kind of gets the ball into the middle, it comes to Füllkrug and he heads it inches past that post. It was just incredible. But full of credit, it was such a great game. That first half was very meaty in terms of the challenges. And obviously the breakthrough as well. Dani Olmo on his old patch as well. He's in Germany. And he's a hell of a player. I think he's so underrated.
He's a very exciting player, isn't he? Every time he's come on for Spain, he's made a massive difference. And he's been like that spark that they need. And I think I've seen him a few times in the Champions League, obviously for RB Leipzig, right? I've seen him a few times. He's always looked very impressive. He's got Man City written all over him. I just feel like Man City are going to come in and get him at some point, and they're going to turn him into like a 40-goal season winger. I just think he's so quality, and I think he's kind of in between that. He's at that weird stage where he's kind of good enough to start, but he has such a good impact coming off the bench that you're like, what do we do with this guy? Do we? So I think it's a really, really great performance from him, a really well-worked goal. Obviously, the German players should be closing those lines down quicker. Like, he's got all the space and all the time in the world, but a very, very nice finish. I wanted to touch on the point that you made about the manager. Yeah, the substitutions were super negative. I just think he really tried a bit too early to try and close the game down, right? I think taking Nico Williams off was a really strange one, because you've lost that out ball straight away, and one of the most dangerous players in the tournament. He just instantly, and Yamal as well. You've taken both of those. If you just spam a ball out to the right wing, they're quick enough to catch it, and it gives you a bit of that pressure. Yeah. I understand, like we said with Southgate, maybe you need to rest players, you need to whatever. But I just feel like he was a bit too cautious too quickly there, and it gave Germany that impetus to get back into the game, right? But we do need to talk about a player who came on and did make a massive difference, which was Florian Wirtz for Germany, right?
Yeah,
he came on and instantly was just causing all sorts of problems to that defense. He scored in Leverkusen time, which is what he's been doing all season, right? 89th minute, incredibly well taken goal as well. But did this, if we look back at Germany's tournament now, before we kind of look at Spain a little bit more, I suppose, if we look back at Germany's tournament now, can this be considered a successful tournament?
I think, look, in the grand scheme of the context of how Germany came into this tournament, I think there wasn't a lot of huge optimism. Obviously, I think it's only the last few months that started to build this kind of belief that this squad could do something. I think there were still question marks over a number of those positions, for example, and whether they had that kind of cohesive understanding as a group. And they've proved in this tournament that actually they've grouped quite well under Nagelsmann. They've bought into his, feelings and style of football. And it's interesting that, Nagelsmann wanted to ensure that his contract talks were resolved before the tournament, to ensure that there was kind of that belief going into this, that, he's building something for the future. He's trying to do something really unique with this squad of players. And I think there's some promising signs for the future. Inevitably, Toni Kroos will be waving goodbye, would be saying goodbye, and what a legacy he's left on that squad as well. The likes of Manuel Neuer as well, potentially that might be his last tournament. I suspect it is. There's kind of elements that they're going to have to evolve. But look, they've got perfectly good players to step into their positions. And as you say, Florian Wirtz, what a player. I mean, we know he's got that in his locker. And yeah, I mean, it's just, unfortunately, he just needs to work on that consistency. I think he's still young. He's still developing his game, rightly so. And also, it has to be remembered that he only this season had his full kind of season after tearing his ACL as well. So that is a massive thing for him to kind of come into this and, off the back of a strong season with Leverkusen, still deliver for the national side. I had high hopes personally. Obviously, he hasn't maybe been at the high levels of certain players in that German national squad. But I think, look, there's a lot of optimism for this German national team going forward. And I think Nagelsmann's the perfect man. I mean, if England had someone of his ilk coming in to replace Gareth Southgate, I think no one would be worried about where England's national squad goes. So, yeah.
Well, Gary Lineker's got it all sorted out. It's going to be Frank Lampard, right? Yes, it's going to be Frank Lampard, and we're all going to be absolutely delighted. Gary.
And Rio Ferdinand as his assistant. Why not?
Gary, sometimes it's okay to just not say anything, right? But the only other talking points in this game, two more talking points I want to talk about very quickly.
Sure.
The penalty wasn't a penalty, right? It wasn't a penalty. No. Okay, good.
No.
And we're talking of Toni Kroos. The tackle on Pedri. Toni Kroos was very, very lucky to stay on the pitch this game. Now, we talked about the first half. It was very meaty, I think is the word you chose to use. I love the fact they were just kicking lumps out of each other for 45 minutes. But that tackle on Pedri was really just a proper, do a job on him early doors, right? It was really just... But is there a wider point about Pedri that they've overplayed him, and now he's more susceptible to injuries, right?
Unfortunately so. I think this was always going to be a risk with Pedri going into this. This was one of the things we covered in the preview as well. Pedri, when he's got the momentum, he's unbeatable, but unfortunately injuries do creep up on him because he's overplayed at Barcelona and he's overplayed by the Spanish national side. Ironically, that left the opportunity for Dani Olmo to enter the pitch, which was the interesting thing. You think about it in that kind of cycle, actually it works out in their favor. However, you don't want to be losing a player of Pedri's ability. It's just looking through that squad and you're thinking, De La Fuente obviously came into this with a few question marks about his in-game management for certain games. I think this was a big test for him. He's got another one now coming up against the French. And this is going to be interesting to see how he reacts off the back of this kind of sequence of events as well as the result. And what is he going to do? I think he will pretty much name as best as possible the strongest 11 that he can. Obviously, Carvajal did that stupid second yellow, which was inevitable, but he's learned from the shithousery of Sergio Ramos all those years at Real Madrid. Obviously Pedri's a big miss, I think, personally. If you think about players that they can bring off the bench now, I don't know, Ferran Torres, there's still question marks about how much he can actually influence the game. Still at this stage, he's still quite young again, and he's probably not at the same ability levels as Pedri. So, I feel sorry for Pedri, but look, I still fancy Spain though, Rory. I still fancy Spain in this next game.
Yeah, I think they're the team that have played the best football. They're the team that have been the most cohesive. They're the team that have a clear system. They have a clear, like, they're working on systems. I think a lot of other teams aren't working on systems. They're working on individual moments, right? Which is international football, right? If you come into an international tournament expecting domestic football levels, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's all I can tell you, right? But yeah, so I think Spain have by far looked like the best team in the tournament. So far, they're going to take some stopping. But, Gareth and his brave boys are on it. Hopefully, we will see. But yeah, for Germany, I'm just glad it was better than we expected. I think, as you said, there's cause for optimism. Musiala just still in the conversation for player of the tournament, I think. And yeah, just a lot of players, a lot of promising signs in that squad. So let's leave Spain and Germany there. And let's go for England's opponents, I think, because this was the next most interesting game. I really enjoyed this one. Weghorst changes the game. This guy is just revolutionizing Dutch football. Montella and Turkey, you were so close. I can't believe how many chances at the end they managed to not score. There was an incredible save from the Dutch goalkeeper towards Verbruggen, right? Towards the end of the game. They tried everything. They were banging the door down, but the Dutch managed to keep them out. But let's start from the beginning. Turkey, absolutely chaotic, managed to get that first goal. The cross from Gula is absolutely out of this world, right? Another game where he just shone completely, right?
Absolutely. And it was just so superb. The momentum, the high press that the Turks had through Aidan. They obviously scored that first goal. And it just looked really controlled from the Turks. In that first half, I felt the Dutch really struggled to kind of comprehend what they could do. This was the thing that we kind of alluded to, that I feel even when you saw them in the first group game against Poland, they were nothing special. And I still feel to this point that actually England have a huge opportunity. If they learn things from the group stage onwards, there's a lot that you can pick at this Dutch side. In particular, there seems to be this imbalance in defence as well, because as much as I'm not a big fan of Stefan de Vrij, he's probably playing or having a good tournament personally for the Dutch national side, as is Nathan Ake. The question mark actually is Virgil van Dijk at the moment. He seems to be pointing figures at people, and that's really generally pissing off the Dutch supporter base, because they're actually saying he's the weak link in that defense, which is an interesting narrative when you think about the whole Dutch squad. He's kind of seen as a talismanic man in that team. But yeah, from a balance perspective, like, he seemed to be the one that was causing more of the issues defensively. And there's question marks whether, they should replace him with Mickey van der Ven, who, again, when he came on, had to do some last ditch tackles. Denzel Dumfries showing what capabilities he's got, showing a better side than we normally see him in an Inter shirt. Let's put it that way as well.
He's just so hot and cold, Dumfries, isn't he? He's just so hot and cold. You never know what's going to happen. Like,
he blocks his teammate Çalhanoğlu with one of the chances. Like, would never happen in a normal Serie A match, right? Or it probably would, knowing him. He'd get in the way of it. But yeah, it's one of those dilemmas when you look at the Dutch squad. But yeah, let's not take anything away from the Turks. They owned that first half. They absolutely dominated. And if anything, maybe they're probably critical of maybe not scoring another in that first half, maybe not trying to push on and get in that second, because inevitably when we saw Val kind of get ready to come on in that second half, you knew inevitably they would do one of their long balls. But what he did very cleverly in that second half was he was able to run at them and scare the Turkish defense, which was the point that I kind of made in the preview. Was I felt like the Turkish defense actually would counteract that with their pace and tenacity, but actually they didn't have that same pressure, unfortunately, and they kind of paid too much maybe respect to him and allowed him to do those turns after those one touches as well. And inevitably that kind of paved way for the Dutch to come back into this match and inevitably cause a bit more of chaos in the box. In particular, if you think about that Gakpo goal, it wasn't a goal for him, it was an own goal, unfortunately, but it was by the fact that there was confusion, there's more bodies in the box, and therefore it caused that issue. And unfortunately, the Turks just couldn't do it. Arda Güler, again, what a performance from that guy.
Just like it's so exciting to watch him. It's so exciting to watch him. And I think, look, we know he's a player who's a bit fresher than everyone else because he's not played much this season. But at the age of 18 or whatever he is, like for him to just turn up in an international tournament and just absolutely run games and just deliver that consistent quality, like just his delivery is always fantastic. His game is so rounded. He's a player that we've fallen in love with on this pod pretty quickly. Like we've just absolutely adore the lad. So it's really great to see him doing well. The striker up front for Turkey, Yilmaz. I absolutely love his vibe. He's just absolutely non-stop, relentless running, hassling, annoying little bastard that you have to deal with. And I just absolutely loved his energy. I thought it was fantastic. And yeah, they were just really, really, really unlucky. I think they've given absolutely everything. I saw some Turkish fans complaining about Montella, but thankfully, a lot of other Turkish fans being like, guys, did you see how we did in the last Euros? Like, I think they're a fascinating country because I think there's so much pressure in that team, right? Because that country really cares about football, right? And they've had some managers in the past that really haven't cared about that national team, like Hiddink springs to mind, right? But I think Montella, obviously, he's coached in Turkey as well. I think he did pretty well domestically over there.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly bought into the culture, bought into the team, and he's getting a tune out of this team. Now, it might not be the most tactical masterclass in the world, but when he was at Fiorentina, he had a very technically proficient, very good team, right? And I feel like here, this is exactly what he's got. He's got some really good players in this team. Yildiz, Çalhanoğlu, Gula, right? There's a lot of quality here. There's a lot of young quality in this team as well. I think they might have the lowest average age in the tournament, or they were, if they're not the youngest, they were the second youngest. Yeah. Like, and he's just nurtured that talent quite well and just got them to play nice football, nice, intense, exciting, chaotic football that is going to in an international tournament when teams are maybe figuring shit out and they're not the most confident. If you've got 11 lunatics running at you, you're going to panic a little bit. And I think he really absolutely nailed it. I think he is in the conversation for like manager of the tournament, if you know what I mean, of someone who got the most out of their team with the best performance. So I think it's really great for them. I was really gutted it's not going to be an England-Turkey semi-final because one of my best friends, Kamal, he's Turkish, and it would have been really fun to see that game. But we do need to say for the Dutch, Koeman continues. Do you think they're going to cause what are there? I feel like this is the best defense England are going to come up against, and possibly the best defense we've come up against so far, let's say. And arguably the most awkward attack. Like there are problems that can be caused for England here, right?
There can be. I think if there's one word that I would describe this Netherlands side is confusion, because you don't actually know what you're going to get out of this team. I don't think they even know as a fan base what to expect from game to game, because unfortunately they've not had a solid pathway in terms of the style of football. That first game was very disappointing against Poland. You know, it needed a late winner, for example. But in between that, when I say it was disappointing, they had moments where they could have killed Poland off in the first half. You know, if it wasn't for the finishing of Depay, for example, they would be further ahead. And I think that's the interesting dilemma is like, how do they go about it? Do they stick Wout Weghorst, or do they still persist with him being the super sub element in their game? And, you know, even the players around him, you know, Xavi Simons, you know, he's being kind of talked up, but again, he had a quietish game and he was very lucky. Actually, we've missed this point. He was very lucky to get away with not being sent off for a really dangerous challenge, should I say. And if it's gone the wrong way, we could be seeing the worst injury we've ever seen at Euros as well. But, you know, Reinders on his day can do something as well, for example. Like you say, defensively, you look at the names that they've got and the ones that they can call upon as well, really solid. And Inver Bruggen, also a good goalkeeper. I know he hasn't necessarily set the light at Brighton, but actually I think he's proved at this tournament that when he's called upon, he can do that. I think for me, the confusion lies with Koeman, actually, in terms of the style of football, what he aims to achieve with this squad. And I don't necessarily think that he knows the best approach. However, you just get this feeling that he has got those vibes of those 80s team. He's got something about him that he's just got something of a stranglehold over England, and it's down to Southgate to outwit him in the sense of that they need to get some early goal or at least score by a margin, because unfortunately if you just lead by 1 goal, it's not enough against this Dutch side. And you can see the form that Cody Gakpo is in right now. He's going to really want to take it to this England side and stick it up them as well, because, you know, inevitably he'll get some abuse as well. But yeah, Wout Weghorst as well. I think he'll want to prove a lot of doubters wrong as well in terms of his spells that he's had at Burnley and Man United as well in particular. So again, there is some danger areas for England to be worried about, but you kind of think with the personnel that England have, they should be more than capable to deal with it. It's just unfortunately, I just feel like Southgate inevitably, if England were to take the lead, will sit back, and that's the only problem. Is we can't sit back. England cannot defend and see out games, unfortunately, despite it being proven on a few occasions.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be an interesting tactical battle. The only thing England can bank on is the fact that Weghorst will come on if it's not going well for the Netherlands. And we know at least Gareth can plan his substitutions accordingly around that, right? We know that is the one certainty that we will get in that game. But before we move on to the semi-final previews, I suppose, let's talk about Ronaldo Psychodrama Part 2. This time it's personal. France 0, Portugal 0. It was all round a bit of a terrible game, right? It just wasn't particularly fun for anybody.
I think we can summarize this in 2 minutes. More of the same from both sides. Ineffective when it was most mattered. France looked on occasions to be the most likely to win this. However, Portugal had their moments. However, it's quite a placid game overall. It was one that lacked imagination. I think I really clocked off a number of times during this kind of game because I really struggled to get my eyes glued on this match. So I was numerous times going through social media while the game was in the background. Unfortunately, key moments, obviously, I think Felix João coming onto the pitch, João Felix even. Unfortunately, didn't have massive impacts, but when he was called upon for that penalty, unfortunately hits the bottom of the post, and that kind of inevitably decided to tie, really, Rory. Because again, France took some really good penalties, and that was enough to win them the tie. You know, Mike Maignan didn't have to do too much defensively. I thought, France are gettable, unfortunately, and this is, I suppose, the worry for the French going forward is that there's talks about Deschamps maybe benching Griezmann, which would be fascinating if he does, because he kind of sees him as the ace in the pack, so to speak. He's going to be the creative spark, but that could be a dangerous kind of scenario for them to go out and not have him playing. I mean, I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like this French squad is fluid in the style of football that they're playing. Like in attacking moments, they struggle. Marcus Thuram hasn't had a great tournament overall, neither is Kolo Muani, to be fair. The reliance on Mbappe in the middle of the park, and N'Golo Kante is having a fantastic season, that has to be said, or fantastic tournament even. But it's all been about the defense, hasn't it? In the French squad, it's all about that defensive line. They seem to be the solid kind of foundation, and then the rest kind of just plays out as much as they can. I don't see much of a system. I don't know if this is just Deschamps trying to make a statement of like, look, we've got the best players. It doesn't matter how we play. We'll still get the win, right? And it feels inevitably that's what he's trying to prove.
Yeah, I think when we talked to Jeremy Magan in our tournament previews, this is kind of what Deschamps does. It's not particularly exciting. It's not particularly fun, but they have the quality to get through. And they haven't scored a goal from open play, right? They are kind of out-greasing Greece in their way to get in there. But they do have that quality. The defense is fantastic. They do have one of the best goalkeepers in the world. If England get the chance to face them, I do still not feel confident, right? Because they have so much quality. And I think when you have that much quality in your squad, there's just a certain level of like comfort or assurance that comes with it. Now, look, could they have done more? Absolutely. I think Portugal were there for the taking. Like, if you really put your foot on their neck, I think France could have really got the job done. But why risk it? I suppose you can just, be sensible, be calm. The chance will come. We'll get there. And it took penalties, but they did get there. For Portugal, I just think this is... Like, this is the squad that's the most rounded squad. It's the most exciting
Mhm.
squad in the tournament. I think it's just Roberto Martinez. It's on Roberto Martinez for me, because I
Sure.
think Fernando Santos, and we've talked about it, Fernando Santos made the difficult decision. He did it for you, Roberto.
Yeah.
He dropped Ronaldo. He dropped him
Yeah.
and said, you are no longer a key player in this team, right? You are going to be an impact off the bench. We have players who can do a job for you. You didn't even have to deal with that nightmare. You've now brought him back
Yeah.
in and created that whole new nightmare for yourself. This was another game where Ronaldo was just holding the team back. He was
Yeah.
just doing the square root of fuck all and just making sure he looked good on camera. Was it this game in the penalty shootout where he looked up at the camera, or was that in the previous one against Slovenia? I can't remember. But he like looked up and made sure he was staring into the camera and it caught his good angle. Like, the comparisons with Homelander from the boys are like 1,000% spot on, by the way. Like, but I think this incredibly disappointing performance from Portugal lies at the feet of Martinez, right?
It does. It does. Unfortunately, look, like, as you've alluded to, and we've alluded to it in most of this tournament so far, is that he's holding the team back. Unfortunately, the kind of perfect meme to describe him, I saw this meme of a Strava account with Cristiano Ronaldo in the top corner as his profile picture. And it's of a picture of the football pitch, and there's a red line in the middle of the pitch, and that's it, between the kind of halfway line and the box itself. It's just him running along the side of it, and he's not doing anything else for that 120 minutes, basically. And that kind of sums up what his performance has been for Portugal, because, like you say, they've got the balance of youth, they've got the balance of quality in every position, they're well in depth, and you just feel like this side should be in a semi-final. They shouldn't be in a position where they struggled against this French side. They should have probably taken the opportunity to have beaten them, especially this kind of display from the French side. I think they had the qualities to beat them. Unfortunately, like you say, it's just the persistence that they have to go through Ronaldo to do things, and that's really unfortunate, really, as a overall rule of thumb. And yeah, until he decides to retire, I don't think Portugal are ever going to have an opportunity where they can win another tournament, because unfortunately it just seems to be holding them back. So drop the ego, and you never know what this Portuguese side could do.
Yeah, he seems to be ruining his. Well, it doesn't seem to be. He is completely ruining his own legacy, and I'm absolutely here for it, I'll be honest. But he really is just. It was painful to watch at times, where you're just like, man, you just need to let it go. And like, at the same time, you've got a 41-year-old Pepe on the pitch who is putting in absolute shifts, is monumental to that team performance. That sprint he had against Thuram was genuinely mind-blowing. I couldn't believe he was managing
incredible
with it. Like, it was insane. And if you, again, a beautiful clip, the journalist in Portuguese after the game who just thanks him for everything he's done for the country, and he just like breaks down in tears. It's a really beautiful moment. Like, Pepe, the turnaround, in my opinion, on Pepe in the last 2 years has been mad, because I absolutely hated him when he was around Madrid. I thought he was the biggest prick in the world, but he's really just, what a man, and what a performance from him. So really, you would think the last tournament from him, right, at 41 years old, you would think it was. There was a player in this game who was 20. I can't remember who it was, and I was like, "Oh crap!" Pepe was 21 when this guy was born.
Was this Conceição? Conceição's son?
Yeah, maybe.
Francesco.
Like, he was 21 when you were born. That's mental. But yeah, what a man. What a man. But yeah, France will be in the semi-finals, and they will be taking on Spain. So let's do it very quickly, Adam. Let's talk about some semi-final previews. France versus Spain. Mbappe, will he get the 8 hours he needs? Will he get his beauty sleep? Will he put Spain to the sword? How do you see this one going?
Yeah, as I speculate, I feel like Spain have a lot more about them. They will attack the spaces that France will leave inevitably in that midfield. It'll be interesting to see how the French go about combating it. I suppose as we alluded to, the strengths are that this back line has been formidable for the French. They've only conceded 1 goal, and that was against Lewandowski and Poland in a penalty. Apart from that, they've been doing so well in open play generally. They've got the attacking outlets through Theo Hernandez, should I say, as well. You know, and again, he's someone that you could say is probably one of the world-class left backs at this tournament. He's been absolutely phenomenal. So
yeah,
it's just a question mark about how they approach it up top. I think it's just those attacking moments that they lack. And I just feel for the quality that they could bring off the bench, that he just needs to shake up that midfield. Stop playing Rabiot, play Camavinga with Tchouaméni, or, you know, the other talents that you've got on the bench potentially. Those players like Bacola as well. When he came on for Mbappe, he had that kind of direct kind of attacking outlet, the kind of same that Spain have right now with Lamine Yamal and obviously Nico Williams. It'll be fascinating if he decides to play Bacola to start off with and maybe Mbappe off the bench. I mean, that's a food for thought kind of moment. Could that kind of work out? I don't know. But Rory, I still fancy Spain to win this, maybe 2-1 over after extra time. That's my thoughts.
I'm going to go with France. Honestly, I just think it's France. And I know there's no logic beyond that. It's France. Defensively, they're fantastic and they will find a way. And I just think they'll just find a way. It might not be, I think Spain are going to absolutely run at them and arguably might batter them. But I think France just get the job done. They get themselves into the final and then, yeah, we'll see. But I think I think also the fact that Spain have got a few players suspended, they're going to have a bit of an issue in defense as to who starts at the wing back. It's kind of going to be Jesus Navas possibly, or we were talking a little bit about maybe Nacho there, but I think that's the wing that Mbappe's on, and it's a difficult, like you want your first choice player there in that position, right? So I think there might just be a few too many players missing for Spain at this point, even though Morata's going to be there, right? And but I think the misses in defense might cost them. So I think France will get it done and they will make it to the final. But Spain will win our hearts, right? They'll be like, the real winners of the quiz kind of thing, which is what they really want, I think. Yeah. So then let's go to the second semi-final. We've kind of previewed it a little bit, but England taking on Netherlands. Obviously, I can't believe there's not been much more talk of this Koeman versus England. There's a lot of scores to settle here. I barely remember 94. I don't remember it really, but I've watched The Impossible Job. It made me very angry. We have scores to settle with Ronald Koeman. This is the opportunity, right?
Definitely from an England perspective. But I suppose there's much more for Southgate to build on from that previous game. They need to look at the positives, look at the things that they didn't work so well and what they can do. Hopefully they can learn from the opportunities that, this Dutch side, there's some weaknesses in their armory as well. I think this is an opportunity for him to put it right in the 90 minutes. However, I get a sneaky suspicion, Rory, this goes all the way again. This goes to penalties. It's got the vibes of it, unfortunately. It's got Euro 96 all over again, unfortunately for me. But I'm not predicting a Netherlands win. I'm actually predicting England to go to the final. I just feel they've got enough to see this squad through. And I think they'll do better at penalties than the Dutch as well.
Well, I was just about to say, I think the Dutch, again, touch all of the wood, but I think the Dutch record on penalties is fucking terrible. It might be worse than England's record with penalties. I agree completely. I think we're gonna. Me and my mates from home have been talking about this entire tournament, and we've been like, "God, England are crap. We're boring. We're terrible. This is awful." And we're like, "We're gonna make the final, aren't we? Yeah, we're gonna get to the final, aren't we?" Like we just the whole way through. We're like, we're gonna bore ourselves to the final. I do just have a feeling that I think we'll just get the job done. I think players like Gakpo can obviously cause us problems, right? Gakpo is the player I'm most worried about, really. But I think overall we have enough quality and our defense has been solid enough that I think we can just be sensible and get it through. And at this point, look, do I wish England played like Brazil 1970? Absolutely. But do I care if they bore me to tears to get to the final? Not even slightly. I just want us to be in the final and then we can deal with having to face whoever the frig it is and me having to find a bar in Milan full of England fans. But yeah, there we go. England on penalties, I think. Look, I'll tell you what, 10 years ago, if someone had said to me, you'd be predicting England to win any penalty shootout, I would have thought they were absolutely mad. So Gareth has changed our world in some ways. But guys, that's everything for the show, really. I think there was one more kind of topic I think we wanted to talk about very quickly about the standard of Euros. Have you enjoyed this tournament so far? I've personally really enjoyed it.
I thought it's quite an exciting tournament personally when you've had underdogs like Albania cause the story in this tournament. For example, Georgia breakthrough in this tournament. Romania, maybe we're seeing signs of development there. So it's great from that point of view. I think the criticism has been more aimed at those more accomplished nations, your likes of Italy, for example. Maybe Hungary disappointing. I think they've been my team that disappointed me in this tournament. But likewise, England, obviously, we're talking about the Dutch. We've been talking about the French as well. Maybe flattered to deceive in the sense of that maybe we were expecting a lot more. And I think the problem has been kind of summed up by the sentiment that these players are really tired, Rory. They look like they're squeezed out of any energy right now. And it's not helped by the domestic clubs kind of probably send them off now to Japan and elsewhere just to play out these stupid pre-seasons, even though they've been already in a tournament. And we forget about Copa America as well, playing at the same time as well. So those players are going to be a bit more tired as well. But also, I think they've got it right, Rory. After 90 minutes, if there's still a draw, they go straight to penalties. And I think they've sorted that out really nicely. I think that's the same that should be adopted by the Euros now. It would make for more exciting 90 minutes, that's for sure. I mean, I could maybe accept maybe extra time in the semi-finals and maybe in the finals. That's probably where I would draw the line, is maybe introduce it for those stages. But where you've got a really tense game in the quarterfinals, make them play it for 90 minutes. Get them to play it out, and that would be kind of the best way around it. But yeah, I think I'm going to call out a quote here. Polish commentator by the name of Dariusz Szepkowski, his summary of the Euros has been, he said, "For me, this is a tournament of tired teams, tired stars, and I'm beginning to think that in the case of UEFA and the 2 years FIFA is squeezing a lemon in which there is hardly any juice anymore." And that pretty much, for me, sums up this tournament. It is these players that we're expecting to maybe deliver on these big occasions, unfortunately, just don't have the strength anymore to really cope with the amount of football that they're facing right now. So let's fix it as soon as possible, please.
Well, this is it. FIFA and UEFA are going to make the bubble burst, aren't they? Basically, they're going to keep going until it all falls apart. Like, I think there's been a lot of talk about how it's been like, the worst tournament I can remember. I can remember the World Cup 2010. That was fucking terrible, right? Yeah. I think this tournament has been actually quite entertaining. I think the only teams that have been boring have been England, France, Italy were terrible. A lot of the other teams have been really exciting. I loved watching Romania. I loved watching Georgia. I've absolutely loved watching Spain and Germany. Like, there's been a lot of teams there that have really turned up and put in great games. Turkey. Like, I think if your team performs crap, that doesn't mean the tournament's crap. It just means you're having a bit of a hissy fit. I think. So I think, it's been a great tournament. I always love international football. But about UEFA and FIFA still completely stands. But guys, we are going to be back post semi-finals, I suppose, to react to the semi-finals, to celebrate England making it to a final, of course. Let's be optimistic. Come on. So thanks for joining us. Adam, anything to say before I send these lovely people home?
No, we'll see you there, and hopefully we'll be able to preview the final and eventually this whole tournament as well, right, Rory?
We will be there. There's nothing getting in my way now, touch wood, so we will be there. I've touched a lot of wood this evening. That sounded weird, but I've touched a lot of wood this evening to make sure none of this happens. But guys, thank you. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button down there. It would be a massive favor to us, and we would be forever in your debt. Keep an eye on our socials, and we will see you on the next one. Ciao, a dopo.
Ciao, ciao.